Have you ever wondered if somewhere in this world, someone you've never met is already changing the person you're becoming? What if the most important letter of your life wasn't written after you fell in love, but before you ever met? And what if, by the time they finally found you, everything inside that letter had already come true? If we ever meet, please read this first. But before we begin, if stories like this make you pause, remember, and feel something words rarely explain, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Mind Vault, where every story is a journey through love, memory, and the quiet moments that shape who we become. Now, let's begin. There was never a name on the envelope. No address. No stamp. Just thick cream-colored paper sealed with dark red wax. It sat inside the top drawer of my old desk for nearly 20 years. Sometimes I'd open the drawer just to make sure it was still there. I'd touch it, then quietly close the drawer again. I never opened it. Not because I was afraid of what it said. Because I already knew every word inside. I was the one who wrote it. Back then, I believed life worked differently. I believed that one day, I'd meet someone who would understand every version of me. The happy one. The frightened one. The broken one. Even the version I hadn't become yet. So one rainy evening, long before wrinkles found my face, long before life taught me how quickly people can disappear, I sat beside a train station window with an empty notebook. Outside, people were saying goodbye. Some hugged. Some cried. Some smiled while pretending everything would be all right. The trains kept arriving. The trains kept leaving. Life never stopped moving. But for some reason, I couldn't stop thinking about someone I hadn't even met. Strange, isn't it? Missing someone who didn't exist in your life yet. That's the funny thing about hope. Sometimes it introduces itself long before reality does. I remember writing the first sentence so slowly. My hand actually trembled. If we ever meet. I stopped. Stared out the rain-covered window. Then smiled to myself. Because suddenly, it didn't sound impossible anymore. It sounded inevitable. Like somewhere, on another rainy evening, someone else might also be wondering if I existed. Maybe they were laughing with friends. Maybe reading a book. Maybe crying over someone who wasn't meant to stay. Maybe walking through an airport. Maybe standing beneath another station clock. Without realizing our stories were already moving toward each other. Funny how life works. We spend years looking for people, while time quietly arranges the meeting. So I kept writing. Not about promises. Not about forever. Life had already taught me that forever is a dangerous word. Instead, I wrote about the person I hoped to become before they arrived. I wrote, I hope you never meet the version of me who believed love had to be earned. I hope you never meet the person who apologized simply for existing. I hope you never meet the one who confused loneliness with peace. Because I wanted them, whoever they were, to know me after the healing. Not before. Looking back now, I realize something strange. The letter was never really for them. It was for me. For the younger version sitting beside that rainy window, still trying to believe she was enough. Maybe that's what growing older does. It teaches us that sometimes, the words we think we're saving for someone else are the very words we needed ourselves. Years passed. More quickly than anyone warns you. Jobs changed. Cities changed. Phones changed. Friends slowly became Christmas cards. Some disappeared altogether. Life has a quiet way of turning ordinary days into memories before we even notice their ending. One day you're laughing until midnight with people you can't imagine living without. The next, You're trying to remember the last time you all stood in the same room. No one tells you which goodbye will be the last. That's why we never recognize it. The envelope came with me everywhere. Apartment after apartment. House after house. Every move. Every new beginning. Every heartbreak. Every attempt to start over. It never left. Sometimes I'd almost throw it away. Then something stopped me. Not fear. Hope. Hope has a strange habit of surviving things logic cannot explain. There were people I almost loved. People who almost stayed. People whose names once felt permanent. But every time something inside whispered, "Not yet." I couldn't explain it. I didn't even try. Friends called me unrealistic. Family said I expected too much. Maybe they were right. Or maybe, deep down, I wasn't waiting for perfection. I was waiting for recognition. For that quiet feeling that says, "I've known your heart much longer than I've known your name." One autumn afternoon, while cleaning old boxes in the attic, I found the envelope again beneath a stack of faded photographs. The wax seal hadn't cracked. The paper had yellowed with time. Dust covered the corners. Yet somehow, it looked exactly the way I remembered. As though it had been waiting too. I picked it up carefully. Turned it over in my hands. For the first time in nearly 20 years, I wondered something I'd never dared ask before. What if the person I wrote this letter for had already walked past me? What if we had shared the same train, the same cafe, the same rainy street, without ever knowing? Or worse, what if we had already met, and I was too busy looking for the future to recognize them? I stood there frozen, holding that unopened envelope, while outside, rain began tapping softly against the attic window. Exactly the way it had 20 years earlier. And for the first time since writing that letter, I almost broke the wax seal. I stood there for what felt like forever. The rain tapped gently against the attic window, almost as if it remembered that night 20 years ago. My fingers rested on the wax seal. One small movement, and the mystery I had protected for half my life would finally disappear. I took a slow breath. Then I broke the seal. The paper crackled softly as I unfolded it. For a moment, I couldn't read. Not because the words had faded. Because they sounded like they had been written by someone who somehow knew exactly who I would become. The first line simply said, "If you're reading this, it means you survived everything you were afraid of." I smiled through unexpected tears. I had forgotten writing those words. Or maybe I had forgotten believing them. The letter wasn't filled with promises for a future partner. It was filled with promises to myself. To never lose kindness. To never become bitter because someone else failed to love me. To keep believing that love should feel like peace instead of something that had to be earned. To never stop looking for beauty after disappointment. And then I reached the final page. There was one sentence underlined twice. "Please don't let loneliness choose for you." I stared at those words for a long time. Because somewhere along the years, it almost had. There were relationships I stayed in simply because silence frightened me. There were people I almost called home simply because they happened to arrive while I was lonely. The younger version of me, the one sitting beside that rainy station window, had somehow understood something the older version had almost forgotten. Love should never begin because you're afraid of being alone. It should begin because you've finally learned how to enjoy your own company. I folded the letter carefully. Not because I wanted to hide it again. Because I finally understood it. The strange thing is, I no longer cared whether I ever met the person I imagined all those years ago. Not because I had given up. Because I realized something far more beautiful. The letter had already found the person it was meant for. Me. All those years, I believed I was writing to someone waiting somewhere in the future. But the truth was, I had been reaching across time to rescue the younger heart that was quietly asking, will everything be okay? And after everything life had taken, and everything it had gently given back, I finally had an answer. Yes. Not because life became perfect. Not because every goodbye stopped hurting. Not because every dream came true. But because healing quietly taught me that peace isn't something another person brings into your life. It's something you carry with you when they finally arrive. If they arrive. As I placed the letter back inside its envelope, I smiled for the first time in years. Not the smile people wear for photographs. The quiet kind. The one no one else notices. Outside, the rain had stopped. Golden evening light slipped through the clouds, filling the attic with a warmth that hadn't been there a moment before. I walked to the window. Far below, people hurried through ordinary lives. Laughing. Carrying groceries. Holding hands. Missing trains. Meeting strangers. Completely unaware that every life is made of moments that only become important years later. Maybe that's the greatest mystery of all. We spend so much time wondering who we'll meet, that we forget to become someone worth meeting. So if we ever meet, whether tomorrow, 10 years from now, or only in the quiet pages of stories like this, please don't look for the person I used to be. Look for the one who finally learned that love isn't about finding someone to complete your story. It's about becoming someone who can share it. And if you're still waiting for your person, don't lose hope. Sometimes the longest journeys create the gentlest arrivals. Sometimes the people meant for us take the scenic route. And sometimes, the letter you thought was written for someone else turns out to be exactly what your own heart needed to read. If this story reminded you of someone, or perhaps reminded you of the person you used to be, share it with someone who needs a little hope today. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. If you could write one letter to your future self or to someone you haven't met yet, what would the very first sentence be? Thank you for spending these moments with the Memory Keeper. Until our paths cross again, take care of your heart. Someone, perhaps even your future self, is counting on it.